most assistants start off with a happy path because it takes so much effort, right? If the user didn't understand this or that they made this mistake, you're like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to make a, I'm just going to make a catch-all, or I'll just do something just so it works, right? But now with all these tools, I can generate hundreds of scenarios. I can even create automated testing, right? We have something called bot-to-bot testing that we're building. Is the idea of how do you have these assistants actually test each other out, right? So rather than a person manually going in and entering like, oh, I want a pizza, you have 100 variations, and you can use sort of a data-based approach where you can say, okay, 97 of these were great, these 3 weren't good. So you're doing user testing, you're doing automated testing. There's so much power there, right? Good to meet you, everybody. I'm Dennis. I work at Voiceflow as the machine learning lead. So I'll be walking you through some interesting use cases here of the importance of pairing large language models and conversational design together with experts. So we talked a little bit about in the previous session about the power of all these large language models, but we really do need experts to make things powerful. So a little bit about Voiceflow. I'll be showing a demo in a little bit, but we're a platform to build chat and voice assistants, and we're also an AI playground. So how do we help people experiment with these cool new technologies and make them useful for customer interactions? And what we all probably experienced earlier or later last year was that ChatGPT came out in November. And this was a huge shift in the conversational AI space of how are we going to chat with assistants, how are we going to build assistants, and it's something that we looked into. So within a month, we launched our new AI Assist features, and we had a bunch of our customers on a webinar in January discussing how are they going to use large language models with content generation, with building assistants. So we really wanted to understand from our customers who are experts in this space, how do we build these assistants? And one of the things that we kept talking about is that we need domain experts to choose the assistants, create the tools, make the decisions, because the large language models, they're a great starting point, but they don't get you to that perfect fidelity at the end. So I guess quickly to go through something that we also learned is that you need the right tools for the job. So we launched our AI playground, and here are some three small features that we added. So we have the ability to have personas, select different models, and incorporate memory into our assistants. So we want to make sure that the experts who are actually building these pieces of software can have the right tools to be successful. So enough slides. Let's go into our canvas. So this is the Voiceflow product. You might have seen it on some videos or demos before, but what we've got here is that we've got a restaurant assistant. And we have it here in, 10 blocks. And we have a fully functional generative AI assistant. So let's go here to the first block where we're going to set our persona. In this case, I have Yoda as an owner of an intergalactic bar. We can also change that to something else. For example, it's called the Cowboy Restaurant. Let's say you are a cowboy who owns a restaurant. So what's going to happen is we're going to set that persona, and then we're going to start a conversation loop where we can chat with our cowboy owner. So let's go ahead and run that. I'm going to run that in Voiceflow, and we're going to connect to ChatGPT to start as our first model. And there we go. That's pretty cool. Okay, our conversation generated by AI here. Let's go on to the next step. So let's ask our cowboy friend a question. What do you have on the menu? So now we're going to go ahead, and we're once again going to use an AI generated response, and we can have this free-flowing conversation about the restaurant. Here we go. Here we got some items on the restaurant. So these sound pretty good. So let's say that I'm ready to order. Ready to order. There's the issue. I copied a project. What I should have done is I should have trained my assistant, and I'll explain why in 1 second. So the reason where we need experts is there are certain points in time where you need to divert the conversation down a path that you can control. So these large language models give us some really, really cool stuff. But the challenge can be that when you need to go down a certain flow, like you're ready to order, this is where sort of more traditional NLU applications, if you're familiar with conversational design, become important, where we can define these paths that we can build. So let's go ahead, fix that, say I'm ready to order. We're going to jump down that path. I'll be asked for my order. I want some salmon and 2 BBQ ribs. Now, what else we're going to do here is we're going to have the ChatGPT summarize our responses here. And we're going to confirm that this is what we want. And then we can place an order to our system here. So sending your order to our system, and there we go, the conversation ends. So we're able to build these powerful assistants here, both with the combination of large language models carrying most of the burden to actually have a conversation or build a prototype. Then down here, we can define a fixed path where we use the combination of experts and our large language models. So a lot of interesting capabilities here, and I just wanted to demonstrate that as we're transitioning sort of from a creation workflow for conversational design to a curation workflow, it becomes even more important to have domain experts who can build these assistants, and that we have subject matter expertise who are working together and make it accessible. If these assistants live in some developer system which requires advanced coding or machine learning knowledge, it's not very useful because we want to make sure that everybody who's involved on a cross-functional team can collaborate together. So that's my demo. Brett, let's chat.
That's great. So I love this demo. I love what you guys are doing. One of the things that has been core to Voiceflow from the beginning is this idea of collaboration. And so I think you sort of closed on that idea as well. You know, how is the fact that you start from this collaboration and you start from a design focus, even though you have other features as well, how do you think that changes the way you think about generative AI in the enterprise versus maybe some of the other players who are in the space?
Yeah, for sure. The analogy I like to tell people is, would you launch a website or a mobile app without a designer, right? If you're a big company, you probably have a process, right, for doing customer interviews, UI designs, right? You're using Figma, you're using other tools, right, to go through that journey. But what we find is a lot of organizations don't do enough design up front to figure out what do their customers want, because conversational AI is a channel, right? A chatbot is a channel. Voice is a channel that has its own nuances. So I think it's really important to do a lot of that work upfront rather than launching and then everything breaking. And then you as a Fortune 500 brand are like, what happened? Why did this go wrong? And having everybody together on one canvas is just so important, because that's how you avoid those issues of, they said this, I said that, wait, no, that's not what I meant, right? And then all this chaos that can ensue in a large organization.
Yeah, one of the things that Braden, your colleague, CEO of Voiceflow, and I were talking about back in December was this idea of the creation process. So there's a lot of discussion about ChatGPT and runtime, being able to answer questions and those types of things, but this idea of the design and then the creation process. And one of the things I'm wondering is how this changes the processes, the expertise, and the role of the conversation designer. So we might have started an NLU or a chatbot voice assistant design process in the path by saying, okay, what are objectives, understand the customers and tasks, and then we would go into these happy path designs. And is that still happen? Is that still going to be the way we do this going forward? Or is it going to be more this idea that we're going to generate lots of different options because it's easy to generate variants now?
Yeah.
And then we're going to go and we're going to edit and curate.
Yeah, for sure. I think with all these new tools, we can just build so much more stuff, right, and make a much more powerful experience. So most assistants start off with a happy path because it takes so much effort, right? If the user didn't understand this or that they made this mistake, you're like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to make a, I'm just going to make a catch-all, or I'll just do something just so it works, right? But now with all these tools, I can generate hundreds of scenarios. I can even create automated testing, right? We have something called bot-to-bot testing that we're building. Is the idea of how do you have these assistants actually test each other out, right? So rather than a person manually going in and entering like, oh, I want a pizza, you have 100 variations, and you can use sort of a data-based approach where you can say, okay, 97 of these were great, these 3 weren't good. So you're doing user testing, you're doing automated testing. There's so much power there, right? And beyond that, you can say, okay, if I'm going to get a pretty good response, I can run through some prototypes, and then I can take that copy and tweak it, right? So then I take the 90 or 80% done version, and then I have my copyright team or my business analytics team who knows the domain actually get it to the final 100%, right? Rather than starting off with writer's block and being like, okay, what do I say?
Exactly. Yeah, Ted Francis just commented from the audience that this is a great point, that they spend a lot of time trying to be thorough in discovery. And maybe this provides a different path for us, a way that we can do this, because you can just generate so much more quickly. There's another comment in here that I thought you might have a perspective on. And it says LLM generated responses tend to be very verbose.
Mm-hmm.
What parameters or educational moments, or I'll add this here, tools or features are you integrating to ensure that they're appropriate for some of these voice-driven conversational experiences?
For sure. So the first thing I'll say is that there's different models that you can use. So ChatGPT is the chattiest one, probably why it's called ChatGPT. GPT-4 and 3 are better in that regard, but when you're working through different prompts, and we actually have more content coming out about this, is that you can add certain components to the prompt, being like, be as concise as possible, provide only this response, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do to the prompt to make sure that it's more concise. Sometimes the model, again, because it's not deterministic, it'll give you different responses every time. We'll just go and go on a little bit of a ramble, right? But with some practice, you can really narrow that down to be a more concise response.
So there's another question here, and it's about LLMs being a good fit for restaurants versus NLP or NLU-based systems. And let's just abstract it. Like, restaurants are a very specific type of thing. You could answer that if you'd like. But this idea of the LLM replacing the NLU, or how this works. I know we've talked mostly about the design and upfront process, but I'd be interested in what Voiceflow's or your particular perspective is on this.
For sure. So what I didn't show on the canvas was that there is actually a block there that does intent detection using an LLM, in that little like capture loop that we had there. So you can accomplish everything that you could do with an NLU, but with an LLM. There are trade-offs though in terms of speed and accuracy and overall management of sort of that experience. So I think you can do both. One of the challenges we actually ran into, it's funny, for our own LLM powered bot on our website, is that at one point, if you asked it what our business hours were, it would make things up. It'd be like, oh, we're open 9 to 5, or like we're open 24/7, and it'd give you a different answer all the time, because we hadn't designed for that response, and the LLM was just giving something plausible. Like, lots of businesses are open 9 to 5. So you need that combination of LLMs and sort of those NLU-based flows, depending on what information is important and how critical it is to your business. You can also combine them by using a knowledge-based system where you retrieve the exact information you need and then use the LLM to summarize it. So that's also sort of a hybrid approach that we've seen as well.
I noticed on LinkedIn you posted about Stable ML coming out. Mm-hmm. Stability AI's new large language model. And I think you also just added to Voiceflow the ability to select different language models. Mm-hmm. And so you've obviously been thinking about this multi-model approach. What are your thoughts about just the different tools that are out there and how people will be using them, if you have any perspective based on what you're choosing to spend your time on integrating into Voiceflow?
For sure. It's definitely something we're thinking about. There's obviously a lot of players in the large language model space right now. Right now, we've integrated mainly with OpenAI, but we are seeing how the space progresses. So for example, Anthropic's model Claude recently got a new update that's quite exciting, right? So it's very hard to keep up with technology. Like the stable LM came out yesterday, Stability's LM. We have Llama that came out a month ago. I mean, GPT-4, it feels like a blur. It might have only come out a month ago. It's hard to keep up with all of it, but all these new technologies, I think we have to evaluate of what are our customers needing, right? If the existing models that we have let them do 98% of what they want to do, we're going to focus our time on something else. How do we enrich the experience? If people want a model marketplace, right, that's a different use case, right? Then we can up the models from 3 to maybe a dozen or even more, right? So I think this is where companies and people have to be careful, is that everything's moving so quickly. You have to be focused. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. Like your head is spinning even just trying to keep up with the news. So yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Last question. So you've introduced a number of features leveraging LLMs within the Voiceflow platform. What are your customers using the most of? Like what do they, and maybe what are they asking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. We get updates on our analytics dashboard on what steps are most used on the canvas. So we're definitely seeing the response AI and set AI step make more and more progress. They're rising above certain steps that we thought would be much more popular, which is super interesting to see from a customer perspective. We had a customer who released an LLM-based assistant, enterprise customer, so that's exciting to see, sort of a large company that we all know sort of building these assistants out. But we're still in that discovery phase, right? It's even though it's felt like it's been forever, it's been 6 months since ChatGPT came out. So many different things to build, right? So we're excited about that space. It's a huge opportunity, but we're working with those customers to say, okay, is your use case very specific to you as a company? So maybe we can be more of a consultative group and take that approach, or is this something that our 10 biggest clients are asking the same question and they're knocking at our door and they're like, please build this, right? So it's a challenge just prioritizing everything that's coming out.
That's great, Dennis. So how should people follow up? I think they can just like download Voiceflow and start using it right now, can't they?
Yeah, you can go to voiceflow.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. We have a number of resources on large language models, YouTube series, etc. So happy to chat if you're looking to build.